as we know it now, really from the 1800s onwards. But the problem is, you see, that can't happen until the Battle of Armageddon's been fought. And this worries some people because they believe there is a secret agenda beneath all these evangelicals in power in America trying to make this happen. Does that explain why world peace never really seems to arrive? Does that explain why the Middle East problem is never really sorted? Because somebody doesn't actually want it to be sorted. Now, it doesn't really matter whether or not there's any truth to what they believe. What is important here is the fact that these people believe it. And if they believe it, they are going to try to influence world political events to make this come true. And I think we need to be very wary of this. And even though George W. Bush is gone, don't forget that President Obama has strong, charismatic, evangelical links. Hillary Clinton is a member of the family, a very fundamentalist Christian evangelical movement in America. So nothing's changed just because we have a new government on this score. And this is where conspiracy theorists say, well, hang on, it's very obvious. We are not being told the truth about what these people believe. Now, don't misunderstand me. There's nothing wrong with a religious belief. People must be free to believe what they want to believe. But it's when it's fundamentalist and it influences all of our lives without us being told, that's when it becomes a problem. By the way, if it makes you feel slightly better, it may interest you to know that Pastor Haggard was in fact disgraced in the sex and drug scandal a few years back now. So that might tell you something about the nature of what's going on here. But nonetheless, there is clearly more influencing the political machinations of the world than we are being told. And this is, of course, where conspiracy theory begins to come into its own. There are some people that believe every single event in the world is coordinated, engineered, manipulated to bring about a world that suits the needs of a few people, a ruling elite, somewhere at the top, which some people call the Illuminati. There are various names you can give to it. And the belief of the conspiracy theorists is that every war, every major terrorist atrocity, every recession, every economic crash, all of it is in some way manipulated, or at least used to create a mandate of control, to suit the needs of people who are running the worlds for their own ends. Now, what's the evidence for this? And why would anybody want this kind of world to be created? Well, it is the belief of many that what is trying to be made here is a one-world government, which is maybe better known to us under the term the New World Order, which is now a phrase that's openly used by people like President Obama, Gordon Brown, openly say we are creating a new world order. But only 10 years ago, less, if you'd have said the phrase New World Order to a conspiracy theorist, they would have frowned at you. Because that's seen as the front for centralised government. Lots of power being put into very few hands, and into the hands of people that haven't so far proved to be very friendly or trustworthy, and who seem to want power above all else, and certainly don't seem to care very much about us. What's the evidence? Well, one of the key things that the conspiracy world believes is that they are creating a system of surveillance and control. And when you look around you, certainly in Britain, and I can't speak for here, but certainly in Britain, it's getting very heavy. The control is out of control. The surveillance is now so much so, we have more cameras in England per person than any other country in the world. They say that you are on film an average of 300 times a day if you go outside of your house. Why? Why is everybody being treated like a criminal? Why are we now having this new ID scheme placed upon us? Here is George Orwell on an ID card, by the way, just to make the point, ironically. Now, the idea of an ID scheme maybe doesn't seem too strange. We have passports, we have driving licenses. What's the problem? Well, the problem is that the ID scheme that's being proposed for Britain, well, not even proposed, it is happening already. It's biometric for a start, which means that all your genetic history, every detail about you, about your physical makeup, your family history, everything will be recorded on a centralised database, which will be linked in with, at first, cards. And that means that within 10 years, if you look at the way things are going, everywhere you go, everything you do, everything you buy, to use public transport or enter public places, anything will require a swipe of your ID, all being fed into a centralised database. And centralised databases have not proved themselves to be very safe. Not in Britain, where there seem to be information leaks every other week. And that means that gives a lot of power over us to any authority that wanted to misuse this information. You see, if we lived in a society of angels, where we could love and trust these wise people working above us, it would be all right. But it's not like that. Because the people implementing the scheme have proved themselves to be extremely dark and rather unpleasant and certainly not trustworthy. And of course, the next stage of all of this is the microchip. A microchipping of the population has already begun. It is not science fiction. We've been microchipping our pets. And now it is people. And now there is a program of everybody having their ID, not on a card, but on a chip, which will be recording everything you do and everywhere you go. And that information will be available to anybody up there, the powers that be, that want it. And it makes you feel like you're being treated like a criminal from the start. Now, there are people who think this is a good thing. But certainly in Britain, it does not sit well with a lot of people. They do not like it. And it feels like too much control, too much surveillance. And the problem is this, that if a government were to come into power that were to be more fascist, shall we say, they could very easily neutralise or get rid of anybody whose political views they didn't want. Not by killing them, but by deleting them off the database. And then one day you find your chip or your card doesn't work. You can't go anywhere. You can't buy any food. You can't function in society. You've been neutralised to the point where you are not even a part of the human race. And this would be a very clever way of controlling people. So this is the kind of world we're moving into. Now, exactly why we'll come to. But some people say at this point, well, this can't be true. This cannot be a bad thing, because if it was, people would have tried to warn us about it. Well, actually, quite a lot of people have been trying to warn us about it, but some of them, you see, when they try to, everybody laughs. I wonder how many here will recognise this gentleman. If I show this in England, there are a few. If you show this in England, everyone goes, oh!